Welcome back. Good Wednesday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Wednesday, April 8th. It is 7:02 on the East Coast, and markets are rallying this morning. The Dow is up 1,200 points right now on breaking news. The U.S. and Iran agreeing to a 2-week ceasefire hours before President Trump's deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face destruction. Fox News can confirm that there is movement right now in the critical waterway of the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump writes this on Truth Social this morning. A big day for world peace. Iran wants to make it happen. The U.S. will be helping with the traffic buildup in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, in the hours leading up to this deal, Iranian leadership instructed civilians and children to form human chains around power plants and bridges in the region, in the midst of President Trump's warnings that the U.S. would blow up bridges. The people were seen lining up, as you can see there. The Kuwait ministry, on the other hand, urged citizens to stay inside and avoid going out until today. A spokesperson from the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense says its country has been dealing with an intense wave of Iranian attacks for several hours. Ashley Davis, your reaction.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we cannot ignore the human shield aspect of this. No one, the Democrats and other media were not talking about this at all yesterday. And listen, this is something, obviously the reactions to the markets, but I'm super excited about this in regards to making sure that Congress continues to do the other things that they need to be doing and stop talking about taking the war powers away from the president. Well, and this kind of stops that conversation now.
It certainly does. And we are talking about a conversation now where money is moving into equities. Adam Johnson, this market and investors obviously have confidence in President Trump and his leadership throughout this conflict, with stock futures surging right now 1,200 points and oil prices down 17%.
And what's fascinating, Maria, is not only up today, but we actually are already well off the lows. Markets always look forward. It's very hard when the headlines are negative to buy stocks or to do nothing and just sit with your positions. And yet markets always look forward. So we were up about 2 weeks ago. Obviously, we're up this morning. This is wonderful. There is so much more to like than to fear in this market. The leadership of President Trump, the performance of our military, it's all something to be so very proud of.
Have there been areas of this market that you think were hit harder than others, that you've been looking for opportunities? I said yesterday that I felt that investors started looking for a bottom a week ago.
Oh, yeah.
And that's certainly what has taken place here. But there's a long runway.
Oh, there's a very long runway. As a matter of fact, actually, 2 weeks ago, I had the best day in the portfolio that I've had in many years. We were up 5.1% in one day because so many high-quality, wonderful companies had been wholesale sold, and there were so many hedge funds betting against all these wonderful companies. Your question about where are the best values, I think you have to go back to AI. Remember the whole argument? It almost seems quaint now after we were talking about missiles that maybe we were spending too much money on AI and maybe the valuations were too high. Well, guess what? After the sell-off, they certainly aren't anymore. In addition to all the AI names, and take your pick on the various semiconductors, et cetera, or a CoreWeave or an Applied Digital reports tonight, companies like Microsoft and Meta are cheaper than the S&P 500. Actually, for that matter, Nvidia trades at the same price as the S&P 500. Call it 21 times earnings, and yet Nvidia is growing 8 times faster than the S&P 500. So you don't have to look very far to find stocks to buy.
Now, obviously, for this earnings period, we will hear management teams say costs are up because the price of oil spiked beginning February, the end of February, and the entire month of March. That's going to be part of the first quarter reporting. But the expectations are embedded. So it's a game of expectations. We're expecting that costs are up. Then we want to hear what they're saying as far as going forward. And look at where crude oil is this morning, down 16%. Joining me now is Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security and former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, Victoria Coates, weighing in here now. Victoria, good to see you. I want to first get your reaction to this ceasefire and the president's leadership on this conflict.
Well, good morning, Maria. Good to be with you. Yes, I think President Trump took a decisive step yesterday to give diplomacy every chance, as he has for over a year now, trying to get the Iranians into a more reasonable state of mind. And, you know, we're going to have some very difficult, complicated negotiations going forward. There's the 15-point American plan, the 10-point Iranian plan. There's not a lot of overlap there yet. There could be in the future, but those are going to be some very serious discussions. But I think, the president has done what he intended to do in terms of neutralizing the Iranian threat from the nuclear program, from the missiles, and now he's going to see if they're in a more reasonable frame of mind.
Yes, and I want to get your take on these two plans because Iran is hoping to continue trading with China and Russia. Obviously, they want sanctions lifted. What is your most important takeaway from Iran's requests here, from their negotiating part of the plan?
Well, and my key takeaway actually doesn't have to do with what they requested. It's the fact that they did it at all. A couple of days ago, they were refusing to engage. There were going to be no talks. They weren't talking to anybody. They wouldn't put a plan on the table. Now we've taken those steps. Now, and they know perfectly well that some of the things in that plan, the so-called right to enrichment, there are going to be some toll that they're going to put on the Strait of Hormuz. These just aren't going to happen. And the key thing here is the leverage that the president has built up over the 5 weeks of this conflict. And as we've discussed, Maria, the systemic problems in the Iranian economy are not fixed. As a matter of fact, they're worse now than they were before the war, even with the elevated oil prices. So Iran is going to be in a weaker and weaker position going forward. That's something President Trump can really take advantage of.
What about China reportedly assisting Iran's missile program? They sent multiple shipments of fuel material aimed at helping to rebuild Iran's defense capability. It comes after a Bahrain-led UN resolution to reopen the Strait of Hormuz failed following vetoes from both Russia and China. We have the new draft resolution from Moscow and Beijing expected to come out in the next 2 days. And Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang was on this program earlier, warning of the possible Chinese and Russian threats that we face right now. Watch this.
Some foreign power, probably China, maybe Russia, was operating drones over our critical Air Force bases. So really right now, the United States needs to be able to defend its bases in its homeland because those drone flights were a warning to the United States of some sort. We don't know exactly what, but my guess would be that they were telling President Trump that if he were to get, let's say, more involved in Iran, that China would attack our bases in the homeland. So we really got to be concerned.
Your thoughts, Victoria?
No, Gordon's right. Yeah, Gordon's correct. I think that we do have to pay attention to the fact that we do have threats here at home, of course, but then also in the Indo-Pacific. And another interesting thing, though, Maria, is that China apparently was one of the actors that were putting a lot of pressure on Iran to do this, to get to the ceasefire. They need that oil more than anyone. So as we go forward, one of the conversations that has to be had, and I think the president will probably do this when he goes to Beijing next month, is what role is China going to play in ensuring the good behavior of Iran going forward, if that's even possible. The United States should not be spending billions upon billions of dollars to ensure the free flow of oil out of the Gulf. That's something a burden that China should assume if that's oil that they want so badly.
Yeah. Victoria, do you expect this ceasefire to last? Do you think the war is over?
Well, again, it's going to depend on what's happening inside Iran, Maria. If they have a lot of instability, if they can't have effective command and control, and they keep firing off rockets at their neighbors, even at Israel, it's hard for me to see it sticking. But we'll give it a chance. We'll see if these reported talks in Islamabad at the end of the week with the vice president take place, and just take this step by step.
All right, Victoria, thanks so much. We'll be checking with you along the way. We so appreciate your insights. Thank you. Victoria Coates, stay with us. We'll be right back.